Thanks, everyone. I'm Georgie McLean. I'm the Head of Strategy and Communications for Screen Australia. I thought I'd just hold off introducing the panel because we decided we'd leave them down there so they didn't all get kind of sore necks trying to look at PowerPoint. And we do have some PowerPoint for you. Just briefly, what we're going to do today is I'm going to take you on a brief trot through some of our recent research and some evidence to inform today's discussion, assisted ably by Rebecca Mostyn, our Head of Research. Laurie Flexer from the IP Awareness Foundation will then take you through some recent research around piracy. Then we will have our international guest, Peter Buckingham, who will speak to us and give us some insights from a different market, some would say a more mature market, and give us some insights on what's worked and what hasn't. And then we'll bring up the panel and have some time for Q&A. So settle in. It's going to be an interesting afternoon, and it's great to have such a fantastic mix of the industry here today. I think collectively we've got a lot of intelligence in this room, and we should be able to move the conversation forward a few steps. So, first of all, what do we know? You would have noticed on your seats as you came in one of these. It's an infographic around online audiences. Now, of course, online isn't the only story around feature film, and we are focusing on feature film today. We know that theatrical still offers a huge opportunity for some films. We've seen some great success of Australian films, thankfully, at the box office, and cinema is not dead by any means. The ABS stats show us that 12 million Australians went to the cinema last year. That's 66% of the population. It's still our most popular cultural activity, not surprisingly ahead of going to the library, but surprisingly perhaps ahead of going to concerts. So the MPDAA stats that Laurie's team thankfully provide us each year showed us that we were still looking at an Australian box office of 1.07 billion, on a slight decline from 1.1 in 2013. Of course, the Australian share of that box office was 2.4 last year, down from 3.5 in 2013. So our Roy Morgan data that we look at for participation rates, which track what people have done just in the last month, give us some interesting insights. They show us that cinema attendance has remained steady over the last 8 years. And this is based on people, as I said, who went to the cinema in the 4 weeks prior to being surveyed. There's, as you would expect, a drop-off in DVD Blu-ray viewing, but it's still holding pretty strong. And AHEDA's recent stats show us it's still a billion-dollar industry itself. It's second only still to TV viewing. The proportion of people watching online has grown rapidly over this period and has in fact overtaken cinema attendance. A lot of this is no doubt due to the introduction of catch-up television. iView came in early 2008 and the others followed in 2010 and 2011, and we helpfully have a little timeline for you across the bottom of our infographic here. These trends are to 2013 and we expect they will continue. So we know VOD is growing and growing fast with new players, more eyeballs and new deals. So we thought we would resource this space with some new research that we released at Screen Forever last year, which was the Online and On-Demand report, looking at trends in Australian online video use. This has been synthesised into a very sexy infographic by our research team. And what we've seen here is some really good news. We've seen that movie tastes are more diverse online, which means it may be easier to target niches. Now, before we get too excited and think that that means that 30% of cinema attendance is for Australian film, you'll see across the bottom, those little icons there, they have a little map of Australia which shows Australian film, art house in the centre, and then Hollywood to the right in both models. The chart shows that 59% of VOD viewers watched a Hollywood film at the cinema in the 6 months prior to the survey. That's about twice as many as had watched any Australian film at the cinema during that same period. And we can also assume, given what we know of box office, that they were probably watching many more Hollywood films than there were Australian films, of course. But people are more likely to mix Australian and art house films with Hollywood fare when they're watching online, hence the more diverse tastes and a broader diet. As you can see, there's far less difference between the proportions watching Hollywood films and watching Australian films online. So, VOD can have a role in assisting more niche content to reach audiences. Some other good news, and I'm sure Laurie will be excited by this, is that newer entrants are less likely to pirate. So we see here in this graph, for those who on the far right, who adopted online viewing 4 years ago or more, 61% of them had used an illegal service, compared to 39% that were using legal services only. But that trend is changing as we come across to the left. Those who've used online viewing services for less than a year are using 67% legal services compared to 33% who had used an illegal service. So that's a positive trend for us in the industry, but it's a good positive trend. It could mean that late entrants to online viewing are being more conservative late adopters, or it could mean that the available legal services now include some more compelling offers. Either way, a good thing for the industry. So interestingly, another thing that we found was that traditional methods are still predominantly used to find out about new movies or television shows, whether they're watching them at the cinema, online, on DVD or on television. And we're also seeing an uptick in social media for discovering new content. So while, as you'd expect, the free-to-view VOD services are the most popular, we also see that there is interest in the paid models. So we're seeing 23% who would consider paying to download in future, and 16% who would consider online rental, and 21% would consider subscribing to a VOD service. And obviously we're seeing some really exciting new entrants coming into the market in the SVOD space, including Netflix in a couple of weeks. For those who do pay online through online rental or download to own, they tend to be screen hungry. So they pay to watch content on all platforms, including DVD and cinema. So even for these guys, cinema is not dead. Now for the bad news. They're not prepared to pay very much. People were asked to nominate the price ranges they were prepared to pay to access content online, and the ranges were defined in our survey. The response is, there may be some limitations in all surveying methods, and people who tend to gravitate to the lower end, but our partners in this, Nielsen, were satisfied that this is a reasonable way to gain understanding of what people are prepared to pay. So nearly half of all VOD users expect to pay less than $3 to rent a new release movie. The standard price is in fact around $6. 63% expect to pay less than $10 for a download to own new release movie. The standard price is $15 to $20. Which means audience expectations are pretty polarised from what the industry is offering. We know that online access is changing audience behaviours and expectations. It's also impacting on business models that enable content to be financed and produced. We continually hear the question, how does anyone make money from VOD? The answer to that question is still evolving. But to help us understand how VOD is impacting on the revenue flows for screen content, we've put together a little guide to the structures that currently influence the way content gets to audiences online and the deals that facilitate online release. And this is literally hot off the press. Okay, so of course we are in the process of rapid change, and these structures will continue to develop over the coming years as players come and go and the Australian VOD market matures and consolidates. So we've developed this resource for the market as it exists today. What's the deal with video on demand? So what the deal does, and Rebecca will help you transition fluidly through our infographic, it steps through the key processes and players, comparing the conditions that apply to the different types of VOD release. So we're looking here at transactional, subscription, ad-supported and catch-up television. It provides some context and real examples in the breakouts, which may not be legible to you, but would be online. So encourage you all to have a look online. It will be pushed out through our social media in coming days. It also addresses the important question of how the players, including producers, make money from VOD, or might make money from VOD, as the case may be. So we know that returns from VOD in Australia are still small compared to DVD or Blu-ray. However, the market is growing, and some of the smaller budget films that may have performed modestly at the box office or on DVD have performed quite well on VOD, including in other markets such as the US. We've seen this in the US with films like Black Death, and some local films that have done really well in cinemas, like Red Dog, have also done well on DVD and also on VOD. So VOD is now a ubiquitous part of the audience experience, but it's not yet been established as a big part of the revenue equation. To take us through some of the challenges, Laurie Flexer, who was just running from the back. So I'll just briefly introduce Laurie before she joins us up here. Laurie's worked in the Australian film and television industry since 1982. She is the general manager of the... Yes, indeed, at the age of 4. She is the General Manager of the Motion Picture Distributors Association, and she's the Executive Director of the IP Awareness Foundation, the hat she's wearing with us today. Her production experiences encompasses a wide range of genres, documentary specials and series, reality TV and corporate videos, our favourite, as well as feature films and telemovies. She has also worked at Screen Australia's predecessor agency, the AFC, as Director of Development, supporting the development and production of feature films, documentaries, short films and digital media projects, so she knows both sides of this equation. Please welcome Laurie Flexer.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Phil. It's an enormous privilege to be part of tonight's proceedings with an audience that's comprised actually of the three sectors where I've earned my living over those 33 years: production, government funding agencies and the distribution sector. As Georgie says, I'm here in my role as the Executive Director of the IP Awareness Foundation, which is an industry-supported association working to raise awareness of copyright, the value of content and the impact of film and TV piracy. I'm going to make every attempt tonight to sound like a rational, level-headed human being rather than a zealous, one-track fanatic with a simplistic view of the issues we'll tackle tonight, in fear of being accused of sounding a little like these guys. It's not easy, though. I am a passionate crusader against the theft of film and TV content and have come to understand the ease with which content can be copied and disseminated, the simplicity of building a justification around that behaviour, and the erosion of online audiences' willingness to pay for content. But I'll try and stick to the cold, hard numbers without too much spin tonight. So IP Awareness undertakes annual research looking at the attitudes and behaviours of Australians in regard to online film and TV piracy. Using an independent research company, the polls are conducted by Newspoll. And tonight I'll be toggling a little bit between our 2013 and 2014 quant and qual research studies and a few other bits and pieces. As always with research, as Georgie pointed out, there's good news and bad news. The good news is not everyone is doing it. 60% of Australian adults have never pirated content. The bad news is that the number of active pirates is rising annually and their activity is increasing frequently. So more people are pirating more often. So piracy is not the social norm in most age groups, except the 18 to 24-year-olds, where more people, 54%, pirate than don't. And if you're starting to think, what the hell does this have to do with audiences? That is your audience. But will the activity and frequency of that 18 to 24-year-old group follow the current downward trend as they get older? Or will they maintain the habit of getting content for nothing? So why do people pirate? What do we know about this? Well, firstly, it's free and easily accessible. People, particularly teens, are not just attitudinally averse to paying, but also physically restricted. Young people in particular have limited funds and their parents are often unwilling to foot the bill. All paid options are still overpriced relative to free. But don't for a minute think that pirates can't afford to pay for content. The Ipsos report released yesterday backs up our own research. The richer and better educated you are, the more likely you are to pirate. Also, pirated content is simply easier to obtain than legitimate content online, as you don't need to provide any personal details, credit cards. There is also a belief that someone could stop piracy if they wanted to, the industry, the government, or the police. This lack of enforcement reinforces the belief that it's really not that important. So parents often facilitate the behaviour of their teenagers by giving tacit or actual approval, and they're often more concerned about their kids becoming victims of illegal behaviour online, bullying or identity theft, rather than being perpetrators. Consumers understand that there are no real consequences for pirating, and so they believe it's socially acceptable. They talk about piracy as the norm. Everyone does it. It can't be stopped. And in this way, they simply legitimise the behaviour. And lastly, they believe it does no harm. Pirates perpetuate the myth that their behaviour is harmless. It can't be compared to physical theft, and if there is a victim, it's only a greedy Hollywood studio or an overpaid film star. Like you, Jamie, on Little Deaths. Greedy Hollywood executive or an overpaid film star. But free impacts how content is valued. The proliferation of online content means movies and TV shows are not as special as they were for previous generations, like mine. and waiting is a lost art. Because younger Australians in particular multitask as they view, content doesn't absorb their full attention. So our research turned up a lot of comments about paying for content being a waste of money or not worth it. I'm not going to watch it more than once, so why should I pay for it? Or I wouldn't want to waste my money on something I wasn't going to love. And of even greater concern, each year, Australians of all ages are less likely to see piracy as stealing, with the number who agree it's theft falling by 7% over 2 years. This is hardly surprising when one understands how people think when a perceived low-risk activity rubs shoulders with an activity that they believe has little impact on others. So I want to challenge a couple of myths given as key reasons that pirates are forced into their behaviours. Firstly, availability. Distribution is a complex balancing act. In Australia, with a small population, limited screens, and far fewer TV channels, global availability is sometimes, but not always, compromised. In 2014, 6 of the top 10 box office films were released in Australia on or before the US release date. The others were scheduled around our school holidays, which are not in sync with the US. TV networks are making every effort to eliminate delays with an increasing number of top-rating overseas shows available day and date. Then there's the vexed question of price and affordability, which Georgie raised. But let me give you this example. 2 weekends ago, Netflix released the 3rd series of House of Cards, leading to a massive surge of piracy. Of the top 10 territories to pirate the show, 5 already have the Netflix service, including the USA, second on that list, where Netflix costs less than $10 a month. Subscription services offer very low-cost access to a huge range of content. In a multiple occupancy home, subscription prices are a fraction of the price of a cinema ticket or a DVD. As more films are offered online, legitimately or not, the idea of a fair price for film is being transformed. A downward pressure is inevitable as consumer VOD use grows, and as evident by the music industry, the film industry would be well advised not to assume a value for money image or to sleepwalk into a world in which price and perception are set by globalized VOD empires. Thank you. The creative industries make an enormous contribution to the Australian economy. Is there an impact on the economy? Yes. Jobs are lost and consumer spending has decreased. Is there an impact of piracy on your revenue? Yes. Looking at a wide range of empirical research, there is evidence that piracy does harm media sales. Is there an impact of piracy on your audience? They may be watching, but they may increasingly avoid paying. So to end off on a really depressing note, in the hope that Peter and the rest of the panel are going to cheer you up, because here are a few online comments that followed a recent eZine article about the high rate of piracy on a specific Australian film. Finding the appropriate distribution model and the path to an audience for your film or TV show should be your decision. Piracy takes the choice out of your hands. Piracy is a for-profit criminal enterprise that profits from legitimate businesses, not a few kids in a basement sharing files. Pirate sites appropriate your revenue, giving nothing back to the creative industry. The mobilizing of the creative community to speak out about the value of creativity is an essential tool in the fight against content theft, and I hope that these few stats have provided you with a marginally deeper understanding of the issue. And here endeth the sermon. Thanks for listening. I'm happy to take questions later in the evening, and you can bail me up at the bar. And remember, I'm a fighter, not a lover, so be warned.
Thank you, Laurie. And on that cheerful note, we're going to welcome Peter Buckingham to come and address us. So Peter has also over 30 years of experience in the film industry, starting at the